You'll never be worth anything. My mother smirked across the dinner table as my cousins laughed into their wine. I swallowed hard, staring at the roast I couldn't taste. The next morning, as I signed a multi-million-dollar deal, Dad's boss walked in, looked at me, and said, "Congratulations, ma'am." You should have seen their faces when they realized who really held the cards. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments? Or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reaches. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story moves you in any way, please consider subscribing. It's free, but it means the world to someone who's finally learning her voice matters. Morning light filtered through the blinds, stretching across the bare hardwood floor of my apartment. I stood in my kitchen, the soft hiss of the kettle filling the quiet steam curling into the air. My pour-over kit sat ready, the familiar ritual anchoring me before another demanding day at Nexus Bio. Beyond the balcony, the evergreens stood like sentinels, their branches dusted with frost, and in the distance the Cascades wore a silver haze. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder: Mom's birthday, Tacoma. I didn't need the nudge. The date had been on my mind for weeks. Another notification slid down right after automatic bill payment for Tacoma utilities due today. I exhaled through my nose, slow and deliberate, and set the phone face down on the counter. The mug in my hand was more than caffeine. It was my gauge of peace. If it cooled before I finished, it meant something had chipped away at my calm. The walk to work took me down a quiet, tree-lined path, the sound of my boots on the damp pavement grounding me. I kept my head down until my watch buzzed. A flurry of messages lit up the family group chat, countdowns, gifs, and jokes about how this year will be perfect because Kieran's bringing Vera. My name didn't appear once. I toggled notifications off without reading further, pulling up my Nexus Bio inbox instead. My chest stayed outwardly steady, but inside, there was that familiar sting, being present but invisible. By the time I stepped into our small industrial office in Seattle, I had my work face on. The stand-up was brisk. I delegated tasks, set deadlines for our next medical trial, approved budget revisions. The KPI dashboard glowed on the wall, a constant reminder that momentum mattered more than moods. My gaze caught on a sticky note I'd left myself: "Don't burn yourself out for other people's comfort." Out of habit, I scanned my inbox after the meeting. An unopened email sat near the top: "Welcome Vera, Finance Manager, Seattle." I moved past it without opening, not ready to think about anyone new just yet. Lunch was a sandwich eaten at my desk, eyes skimming a trial compliance report. A slant of sunlight cut across the floor, warming the edge of my chair. I opened my journal and wrote a single line in the middle of a blank page: "I don't owe anyone my silence." I closed it, almost afraid to look at the truth I'd just put down. That evening, I stood on the balcony, coffee freshly poured. The air bit at my skin, but I stayed, watching mist coil between the trees. My phone lit up Dad. My fingers tightened around the warm ceramic. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out. Instead, I lifted the phone to my ear, bracing myself for whatever I didn't want to hear. The living room was still when I answered, my voice lighter than I felt. "Hey, Dad. I was calling to let you know I'll be in Tacoma a few days early to help set up for Mom's birthday." He didn't hesitate. "Azra don't come this year." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What? There will be important guests. Kieran's bringing Vera. Your work. It's hard to explain. You being there will make things awkward." "Are you saying I'd embarrass the family if you insist on coming?" His voice turned hard. "Don't call me Dad." The line went silent except for my own breathing. I looked down at my mug, still half full. I set it on the table. By the time I noticed again, the coffee had gone cold. That tiny loss felt bigger than it should have, like watching trust seep away unnoticed. I walked into the kitchen, flipped open my laptop, and pulled up my bank statements. 36 months. $6,500 a month. Electric, water, internet, health insurance, home. Repairs sometimes inflated for pre-party services I'd never agreed to. I took a breath and began canceling each automatic payment. One by one, confirmation screens appeared. Payment canceled. The quiet that followed felt like cutting free from a rope I hadn't realized was strangling me. A final warning popped up. Next billing cycle will be unpaid. I closed the laptop. My iPad pinged a video call from Aunt Evelyn. I answered the soft light of her kitchen behind her. Azra, your mom's been in a panic. What happened? You've never missed Christmas or her birthday. I hesitated, then told her exactly what Dad had said. Evelyn's eyes widened, but before she could answer, she glanced down at her phone and sent me a screenshot from the family chat. Kieran's words were plain. Make sure Azra stays home. Don't let her ruin the introduction. The hurt was sharp, but strangely clarifying. It wasn't just my parents. The bias had been built brick by brick, with Kieran holding the blueprint. That night, I stood on the balcony in the chill city lights glowing faint below. I drafted a message to my mom, deleted it. Drafted again, deleted it. The cursor blinked against the empty screen. I put the phone away. Silence, I decided, would be my statement. I turned back to work, flagging a red alert on an invoice from Tacoma Heritage Events. The authorized signatory, M. Voss. My mother's name. I sat with that for a long moment, the hum of the fridge loud in the quiet. My phone buzzed with a new text from her. Don't do anything foolish on your mother's birthday. I opened the Notes app and typed, foolish, nata, the first time I don't carry their weight. Then I set the phone down, wrapped my hands around a fresh cup of tea, and stared into the dark, waiting for the storm I knew was coming. By the time the rest of Seattle had gone quiet for the night, my apartment was lit only by the pale glow of my laptop screen. The tabs multiplied as I dug deeper into the invoices, line after line of utilities and maintenance that I'd been covering for years. I had always assumed these were necessities, but the breakdown told a different story. There were seasonal garden packages before every big gathering, high-speed business internet installed to live stream special family events, projector rentals for celebrating Kieran's achievements, and chandelier upgrades purchased in the weeks before holiday dinners. The newest invoice stopped me: Tacoma Heritage Events, VIP package, curated video presentation. I cross-checked the payment dates with my own transfers. Every single one matched down to the hour. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing at the bridge of my nose. My phone buzzed with a new email subject line: Welcome, Vera, Finance Manager, Seattle. I opened it half-heartedly, expecting a generic HR introduction. Instead, Vera introduced herself warmly, thanking me for the opportunity to work under my leadership, and flagged 3 pending expenses that needed immediate approval, one of them for Tacoma Heritage Events. She added a curious note: the authorized party is listed only as M. Voss. We'll need to verify for compliance. I clicked over to the internal directory, scrolling until her profile appeared. The headshot hit me in the gut. It was her. The same woman from family photos at last year's summer barbecue, Kieran's girlfriend. Now she was in my company, in my department, reporting directly to me. The loop was complete. Money flowing from my account into family events funneled through a name that matched my mother's, handled by Kieran's partner, who now worked in my office. All I had to do was let the company's process play out. The truth would surface without me lifting a finger. I composed a reply, keeping my tone clinical. Please request official documentation verifying the authority of M. Voss before processing. Company policy requires full KYC compliance. I set the deadline for the day before my mother's birthday. My name and title, Azra Voss, co-founder, sat beneath my signature in crisp font. No explanation, no personal edge, just procedure. I closed the family chat, completely disabling all notifications. The reminder I'd set for myself, "Take the day for you," flashed quietly in the corner of my screen. A separate alert from Tacoma Utilities followed moments later. Unable to process payment. Services will be disrupted within 24 hours if unresolved. I shut the laptop, swapped coffee for chamomile tea, and stepped onto the balcony. The cascades were fading into shadow, the air cold enough to bite. Behind me, my phone lit up again and again, with message after message from the family thread. I didn't check a single one. I let the night settle over me, calm and unshaken. Christmas morning came with the hush of falling snow, the city muted under its weight. I brewed my pour over, the steam rising in lazy curls, and set a Coltrane record spinning. The golden light from my desk lamp pooled onto the counter, and for a few minutes, I allowed myself to believe it would stay this way. The first vibration on the counter I ignored. The second I flipped over to see Mom, Azra, the power's out. No heat. Seconds later, Dad, no water, no internet. Call the provider now. I placed the phone face down and poured my coffee. The buzzing continued, each ping closer together, urgency giving way to accusation. Kieran's message cut through the noise. You ruined Mom's special day. Guests are here. She's crying. Fix this. I took a screenshot and archived it, proof of the role I was always cast in the family's emergency response unit, the person they called only when something broke. The screen flared with light again and again, like a storm trying to find my attention. When my Aunt Evelyn's name appeared, I answered. The video feed opened to a dim candlelit room. The living room in Tacoma looked smaller in the half-light, guests milling in awkward clusters. The Christmas tree stood unlit, its ornaments dull without electricity. What happened, Azra? She asked softly. You've never missed Christmas. Dad told me if I came not to call him my father, I said, my voice even. Her face stilled. She didn't speak for several seconds. The sounds in the background, murmurs, shifting feet, filled the silence. Then a familiar figure appeared in the frame. Vera, dressed in a sleek cocktail dress, hair glossy and perfectly arranged. She caught sight of me on the phone and tilted her head. Azra Voss, the co-founder of Nexus Bio. The room shifted instantly. Conversations died. Kieran whipped his head around, his expression collapsing from irritation to panic. My mother froze where she stood. Vera smiled, oblivious to, or perhaps enjoying, the tension. I'm the new finance manager for the Seattle office. Nice to finally meet you, boss. The stillness that followed was almost physical. Eyes darted from me to Kieran to my mother, then back to me. Welcome to Nexus Bio, Vera, I said evenly. I hope the launch event goes smoothly. And then, I ended the call. The chamomile tea was still warm when I returned to my chair. My phone began to trill again, a stack of unread messages climbing past 20 in minutes. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. The day had only just begun, and for once, I was in no hurry to put out their fires. The messages came like hail against glass, fast, hard, and pointless. Kieran led the charge. You picked today on purpose to humiliate Mom. You're cruel. A breath later, my mother, I never thought you'd take revenge on your own family. I let the screen glow on the table for a full 10 minutes. Then I typed a single sentence and hit send. If a truth is enough to ruin the party, that party was never built on anything solid. Silence from Kieran for a beat, then his name vanished from the group. He'd left the chat. A lone reaction bubble from my father appeared on my reply, the same smirking symbol he used when he wanted me to know I'd disappointed him. I set the phone down and stared out the window at the whitening city, the snow settling into the seams of the street. Email pulled my attention back. Vera's name in the subject line. I opened it, bracing, and found a measured, careful note. I didn't know. I'm sorry for walking into that room and learning who you were like that. I respect how you handled everything by saying almost nothing. I ended things with Kieran tonight. He wasn't honest, not with me, and not about you. I read it twice. The respect in her wording wasn't flattery. It felt like someone naming the thing I'd been trying to practice and failing to explain restraint as a choice. I replied briefly, "Thank you. Keep work separate from the rest. We'll be fine." The night air was sharper than earlier when I stepped onto the balcony, tea warming my palms, the Cascades a dark spine on the horizon. Across the way, a neighbor's living room glowed gold. I opened my notebook and wrote a line that had been trying to form all day. I will never again buy my way to a seat at any table. I underlined it once. Wind raked the tops of the trees, and for a moment I let myself feel the ache of it, all the years of giving, of quietly fixing things so someone else could shine. The ache ebbed, leaving something steadier behind. When the phone rang with Kieran's name, I answered not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to hear which version of the story he'd settled on. He didn't waste time. "You cost me deals tonight," he snapped. 3 potential buyers walked out after Vera called you boss. "Do you have any idea how that looks?" "How it looks," I said. "Did you ever ask what I do at Nexus Bioscience?" I could hear voices and clinking glass in the background, the muffled chaos of a party that had turned into a problem to be managed. He didn't answer my question, and I didn't repeat it. I ended the call. The line cut cleanly, and with it one more tether I didn't need. Back inside my inbox pinged again. A subject line from my mother. "We need to talk about family finances." I clicked it open and then closed it without reading more than the first sentence. Not tonight. The wait would be waiting in the morning, and if they intended to pull me back into the old role, they would have to do it while looking me in the eye. I turned off every sound on my phone and let the apartment go quiet. I slept hard and dreamless. When dawn came, it spilled over the floor in long slabs of pale light, and the city outside had the fragile, clean feeling that follows a storm. Somewhere in Tacoma, I imagined the house still chilly, the guests telling themselves it hadn't been that bad. The truth was still the same size, whether the room was lit or not. I poured coffee and tasted for the first time in days, something warm that stayed warm. They arrived in the afternoon, not calling first. The doorbell's tone felt out of place in my apartment, too cheerful for the 2 figures on the other side. My mother clutched a leather portfolio to her chest. My father stood a half step ahead, jaw set like he was bracing for a fight, or pretending there wasn't one. I let them in and poured water, the small hospitality of it strangely formal. We sat around my kitchen table as if we were strangers meeting about a lease. My mother glanced around, taking in the space, the clean lines, the unadorned walls. "It's very quiet here," she said. "That's the point," I replied. My father folded his hands. "About Christmas," he began, as if the word were a neutral thing. "Let's not dwell. We need to discuss the path forward for the family." There it was. The language of planning, of structure, as though history could be repackaged as strategy, and no one would notice the seams. He continued. "Kieran's going through a rough patch. The breakup blindsided him. Business is delicate right now." My mother nodded quickly. "You're in a better position than he is, Azra. We're asking you to help." "How much?" I said. I didn't ask why. 2,000 a month, my mother said, sliding the portfolio open. "House expenses, healthcare. We want to start putting aside for our retirement properly." She said it as if we hadn't been doing that dance for 3 years already, as if the numbers on my statements were a misunderstanding we could tidy up with a new plan. I didn't look at the papers yet. "And Kieran? He needs time," my father said. "We're not going to force him while he's rebuilding. We need to pull together, not push him." A corner of paper slipped from the portfolio and fluttered to the floor. My mother reached for it, but I was faster. A bank letterhead stared up at me, bold type near the top. "Notice of delinquency," and below that, the address of the Tacoma house. The paragraphs detailed a refinance from last year, a second mortgage open to fund an investment, projected returns, then shortfalls, then new terms that were no longer optional. And there, neatly typed in a section of expected plan for remediation, was the name of Kieran's development group. I set the letter between us. So the house is collateral for his project. My mother's mouth tightened. My father cleared his throat. "These are complicated decisions. Opportunities don't come without risk. And your support the last few years helped us keep things stable while the project ramped. Meaning, I said my payments kept the bank quiet. No one argued. That was its own answer. I looked at the stack again, at the orderly rows of costs, the polite vagueness of the categories. A familiar fatigue pressed at my eyes, the kind that comes from lifting weight in the dark and being told daylight is expensive. I slid the letter back toward them and closed the portfolio. If you want my help, I said, it has to be fair. Kieran contributes at least $1,000 a month. If I step in beyond that, I'll need assurance that the Tacoma house passes to me when you're gone. My father's chair scraped loud against the floor. His face colored the mask of composed authority cracking. You dare to set terms with your parents? His palm hit the table, not quite a slam, but close enough to make the glasses jump. I didn't flinch. If raising me was an investment, then you're the ones who put it in bookkeeping language first. I'm speaking yours back to you. I will not pay with my silence anymore. My mother's eyes shone not with tears but with a flinty disbelief that I could stand in front of them and refuse the old choreography. My father looked anywhere but at me, the window, the sink, the blank corner where a painting might have been if I had the appetite to decorate the way they preferred. He recovered himself, smoothing his expression. We came to you in good faith, he said. You've changed. I have, I said. That's the goal. We sat in the kind of quiet that weighs more than the words that fill it. After a long minute, my mother gathered the paperwork with careful hands, as if order on the outside could will order back into the rest of it. They stood. I walked them to the door. My father nodded once, the way you do at a neighbor you don't know well. When the door closed behind them, the apartment exhaled. I filled the kettle not because I needed tea, but because the sound steadied me. From the table, my phone vibrated, a message from my mother, the subject line recycled from the night before. We need to talk about family finances, as if repetition would soften me or make me forget what I'd seen. I didn't open it. Instead, I opened my calendar and put a block across the weekend. No family business. I added another event: review legal options if rumors continue. I'd heard the whispers in the hallway at work that morning, two voices I recognized from finance, speaking just softly enough to think they were safe. I'd put a stop to that, already, called a quick meeting, reminded everyone of our confidentiality rules, and made sure the message traveled. But I knew better than to assume one conversation would end it. At the window, the afternoon light thinned to the cool blue that comes before dark. In Tacoma, lamps would be turning on and someone would be deciding whether to heat a bowl of soup or drive somewhere to eat where the bills were already paid. Here, the kettle began to sing. I took it off the burner and stood still, listening to the last hiss fade. They would try another angle. They always had. But the terms had changed, and for once, I was the one who'd written them. I didn't have to wait long for the first ripple to hit. Aunt Evelyn called me just after sunrise, her voice taut, as if she had been holding her breath since the day we last spoke. She told me my mother had been on the phone with nearly every branch of the family, spinning the Gyeongsin fallout into a tale where I had placed cruel conditions before offering help. She called me cold, ungrateful, and driven by spite. Evelyn sounded embarrassed to even repeat the words, but I could hear the undertone. People believed it. By noon, my inbox filled with thinly veiled reprimands from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Some carried the soft guilt-tripping of, "We raised you better than this," while others went straight for the accusation. "How could you turn your back on family?" I didn't reply. I filed each one neatly as if building an archive. At Nexus Bio, the whispers took on a different shape. Walking down the hallway toward the finance office, I caught two analysts speaking in hushed tones. One said I heard she cut off her parents to keep more for herself. They didn't realize I was only steps away until the words hung in the air like a stain no one could scrub out. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I traced the thread back. A friend of Kieran's had apparently been at the Gyeongsin dinner, and between drinks had added his own flourishes to the story. By the time it reached my building, it was a perfect little parable of greed. I acted quickly. I called a department meeting, laid out a crisp agenda, and reminded everyone of our strict boundary between personal lives and professional conduct. Our credibility, I said, rests on the discretion we keep for one another. I didn't mention the rumor. I didn't have to. Later that night, a message from Vera lit my screen. Someone's trying to pull company financials using you as the excuse. They asked if I could share a few figures to help them understand your role here. I told security. I leaned back, the implications clear. This wasn't just about humiliating me in family circles anymore. They were edging toward my livelihood. I began saving everything: emails, call logs, chat transcripts, stacking each into an organized system. If they wanted a fight on paper, I would meet them there. I chose the location deliberately, a cafe in downtown Seattle, a place small enough to feel exposed, but public enough to keep voices low. The wood tables were polished but scarred, holding the history of every conversation that had happened over them. My parents were already seated when I walked in. My father wasted no time. "Let's be reasonable," he began. "Drop the conditions, contribute monthly, and stop making things harder for your brother." My mother's nod was curt, her lips pressed tight. I asked them directly about the second mortgage and the investment property Kieran had convinced them to back. They hesitated, their eyes sliding away to some point over my shoulder, before admitting the numbers weren't what they'd hoped. "We just need time to recover," my mother said, voice soft as if rehearsed. I set a manila envelope on the table and slid it toward them. Inside, a copy of the bank's warning letter, photographs of every utility invoice and event payment tied to my transfers, and a ledger of the exact amounts I'd funneled into that house over 3 years. "If we're talking business," I said, "this is the return you've seen on my investment." For a moment, neither spoke. My mother stared at the papers as if they might rearrange themselves into a story she could still control. My father's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Then I told them about the rumor that had slipped into my company, how it had been traced back to the very circle they fed. "If anything you say or do damages Nexus Bio," I said evenly, "I will pursue it legally. I've kept quiet, but quiet is not the same as blind." My father's hand rested on the table, but he didn't reach for mine. My mother gathered her purse slowly, as though every second delayed the inevitable. They stood, offered no handshake, and walked out together. I left a few minutes later, the winter air sharp in my lungs. It wasn't relief exactly, more like the final page of a chapter I'd been trying not to write. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I crossed the street. Vera's message was short. "There's news. But this time it's good." It felt like the first breath before a shift in weather. The message from Vera came early, clipped, and factual. She'd intercepted another attempt to pry into Nexus Bio's financial records, this time from someone in Kieran's orbit. She attached a full system log showing the request and the denial, a neat trail of timestamps and IP addresses. I read it twice, not because I doubted her, but because it was the kind of proof that felt like steel in the hand. If this ever escalated, I had what I needed. That afternoon, I sat at my desk with the leather briefcase I'd chosen, deliberately, a place where nothing went in, unless it mattered. I pulled together every document from the last 3 years: bank statements, utility bills for the Tacoma house, the mortgage contract, and every email or chat transcript that hinted at defamation. The case felt heavier as it filled its weight, both a shield and a weapon. Just as I zipped it shut, my phone rang. It was the bank manager handling the Tacoma property. She wanted to confirm they'd received the overdue mortgage payment. My parents hadn't sent it, someone else had, from a private business account with no name attached. I didn't need to guess. Kieran was scrambling to cover the arrears, likely more to preserve his image than to resolve the debt. It was the clearest sign yet that the cracks beneath their stories were spreading. I didn't bother arranging another meeting. Instead, I drafted a single email copying my parents, Kieran, and Nexus Bio's counsel. It was measured, professional, and airtight. I confirmed the end of all financial support, attached proof of every contribution I'd made, and issued a formal warning any further defamation or attempts to access company information would be met with legal action. My final line was simple: I've chosen silence for the sake of peace, not because I lack evidence. My mother's reply arrived first, one sentence: "We have nothing more to discuss." Kieran didn't respond at all. My father sent a text: "You've changed." I read it once and left it unanswered. That night, I took the last family photo off my phone's home screen and replaced it with an image I'd taken on a trip to the mountains' snow-dusted pines under a clean winter sky. When I opened my calendar and saw the contract signing scheduled for next week, it felt like the truest sign I'd already turned the page. The rain had settled in by mid-afternoon, turning the streets into mirrors for the gray sky. I ducked into a small cafe in Capitol Hill, its wood-paneled walls and low-burning fireplace wrapping the room in a kind of warmth no central heating could imitate. The windows fogged in the corners, and the air smelled faintly of waffles and cinnamon. Somewhere behind me, a spoon tapped lightly against porcelain. I opened my briefcase not for the files this time, but for the contract waiting on my signature. Nexus Bio was expanding into Europe, the result of months of negotiations. I signed with a steady hand, ink on paper, a commitment to a future I'd built without owing anyone for it. Vera appeared at the door just as I set the pen down. She crossed the room, handed me the quarterly financial report, and gave a brisk nod. We spoke only about the numbers, the next milestones, and the delivery schedule. No mention of Kieran, no detour into the past. "Good work," I said. "Let's keep this pace." When she left, I glanced toward the counter. Behind it, carved into the wood, was a phrase I'd somehow never noticed before. "Home isn't where you were born. It's where you choose to belong." I let my gaze rest on the words, the truth of them pressing gently against something that had been tight in my chest for months. This, my work, the boundaries I'd drawn, the people who respected them, was the home I'd made. Not the one tied to an address or a family name, but one held together by choice and mutual respect. I cupped the mug in both hands, steam rising into the dim light. The coffee was still hot, and I realized that for once I had no reason to rush. No lingering need for an apology that would never come. I took a slow sip and looked out at the rain-slick street. I walked out of the shadows, I thought, not by shouting, but by standing still. Self-respect, I knew now, wasn't just the foundation of every relationship, it was the door you closed behind you when you decided never to sell your place in your own life again.